Mhm.
2, 1, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm Mary Fran Johnson, the Executive Director of CIO Programs, and I'm very pleased to be here today with Jack Clare, who is the Chief Information and Strategy Officer at Dunkin' Brands, which is headquartered locally here in Boston. Jack joined Dunkin' back as an enterprise CIO in 2012. And then by 2015, he had added the chief strategy officer, to his title. And that was a move driven by a CEO who very wisely recognized that the critical role that technology is playing in Dunkin's business. In his current role, Jack is responsible for directing all of IT resources with a very intense focus on supporting thousands of Dunkin's franchisees across the country and driving restaurant profitability as well. All told, there are about 20,000 stores in the Dunkin' brand. Half of them are Dunkin' Donuts and the other half are Baskin-Robbins. And while Dunkin' is a very well-known consumer brand here in the Northeast and especially around New England, it is known not just for the donuts, but for the ice cream. And this $900 million business has been in the news a lot lately with its plans for a brand refresh and an expansion. Before he joined Dunkin' 6 years ago, Jack was the VP of IT and the CIO for Yum Restaurants International, where his responsibilities included IT strategy for more than 14,000 restaurants internationally for brands that we all know and love, such as KFC and Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. And before that, Jack held other IT leadership roles at Constellation Brands and Sapient Corporation. He got his start in IT as a systems and flight test engineer with the United States Air Force. Welcome here, Jack Clare.
Thanks very much, Mary Fran.
Delighted to have you. All right, we should start out with the basics. You should tell us what's your favorite coffee in the Dunkin' line.
Sure. Well, while we may not be known for espresso, we actually have a full line of espresso-based drinks, and I've always been a big fan of the quick shot, so a double espresso would probably be my favorite.
Well, that's great. It would be embarrassing if you had to run out to Starbucks and get it, I guess.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Now, what do you think is the most craveable donut in the lineup?
Yeah, we have, I think maybe inspired by the flavor variety from our Baskin-Robbins ice cream brands. We've really been innovating our innovation team for a lot of our recent windows and frankly for the last couple of years. So it's an interesting platform to get creative with donuts. So recently we had a partnership with the Girl Scouts and had Girl Scout cookie-inspired donuts as well as drinks. And now we've got, at the moment, a Comet Candy and Spring Fling donuts. So we've been innovating quite a bit, but I have to go back to my childhood. And when you aren't from Boston, we love the idea of a Boston cream. So it's still a standby favorite.
Excellent. That happens to be my husband's favorite as well. Back when I was eating donuts, before I started denying myself the pleasure, I was always just all about the glazed. Just really like the straight-up glazed.
And also still a standby. Yeah.
Still, yes. Now, and one of the things I mentioned in your expansion, I didn't mention that you're also doing a certain amount of streamlining with the menu that's at Dunkin' right now. And you're going to pare down to like a dozen of the most popular brands. That's what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, there will be, and we've actually largely already done that. But it was based on an initiative a couple of years ago where we did a consumer perception study, and it turned out that we had more food items on our menu at the time than a lot of our competitors who specialize in food, and we had more drink items than those who focus on drinks. So we were trying to be all things to all people with so much variety.
Of choices.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The problem is it was hard to execute in store. So we've pared that way back. Did a test last year. Test results were very good. In fact, in large part, we would pull a large chunk of the variety off the menu and consumer intercept. So talking to real customers going into those stores, never even noticed. So a lot of those, I hate to call them fringe products, were not really being purchased. They were just on the menu available.
Well, and we'll talk about this more as we get going here, but there is just so much competition for the eyeballs and the click-throughs and on the apps. The idea of having a very focused and well-known product line is very powerful these days in retail, I would think.
Yeah.
Well, and just starting out talking about this reminds me that the probably the most interesting thing about your title and your role there is how it combines the CIO role with the strategy role. And clearly, we'll talk about the consumer products kind of surveys that you've been involved in. But I wanted you to talk a little bit more about this relatively rare combo and how this, I know it came about a few years ago, but how has that role been developing?
Sure. At the time, our CEO, who I work for, was looking for ways to provide me development opportunities. He's been a great supporter. He's a huge fan of technology and how it supports and can enable our business. So that was really twofold. One, we were starting to embark on this large initiative, which was great experience for a technologist to lead something more general to the business. So we needed someone to lead it. And to your point, the conversation at the time, and I think it's still true today, is not exclusively, but in large part, almost all major business initiatives or opportunities to grow the business are enabled by technology in one form or another.
Often completely empowered by it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation was, let's combine whatever strategic initiatives come out of that study with the guy who's going to end up catching a lot of them to make them real.
Because it's going to land on your desk anyway.
That's right.
So you might as well kind of have hands on shaping it.
That's right.
As you go along. Now, do you end up having to consciously switch hats between CIO and Chief Strategy Officer, or has it become the blended? It's kind of one of those. It is what it is in terms of the job.
No, and in large part, honestly, we're in a cycle now where a lot of those strategic initiatives have been agreed upon, and as our president of the U.S. Dunkin' business says, at this point, thinking time is over and it's doing time. So we're actually in process with a lot of major initiatives, not just in my area, but across the entire business, to actually act on a lot of the insights that we got out of that study. So frankly, that's a lower priority and time sink at the moment. I'm quite busy executing.
Yeah, with the execution and operation piece of it is one of the things you mentioned. It's fun gathering up all the research and the information and doing the strategizing part. Always seems like the fun part, but it does seem like CIOs are very. I often think they're very well positioned to move into chief operating officer roles.
Oh, I totally agree.
So much of what
we
they
are
do.
Operators at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly. Now, one example of that strategy role that we've mentioned already is this consumer perception study that you were involved with. Tell us more about that and what you learned about the consumers as a CIO.
Sure. If you think about our brand, and when I say that, I mean the Dunkin' brand, because that was specifically targeting Dunkin' in the domestic U.S. market.
Okay.
It's an interesting brand. It's probably the last, if you call it super regional brand, because we did start, 10 miles from here.
Yeah.
And it's radiated outward, just like a great competitor of ours on the other coast started in Seattle and has radiated out from there. And so we've passed each other in the middle of the country. The interesting thing about our brand is it's not exactly uniform across the country. If you go into new markets, after all, we do say donuts on the sign.
Yeah.
They think of us as a donut concept, which is a much lower incidence purchase. You just can only eat so many donuts.
Yeah.
But here in the core market, in New England, the Northeast broadly, as well as, now if you get out into Philly, Baltimore, Washington, Chicago, well-developed markets where we have high penetration, we're actually a beverage concept. And very specifically, beverage, coffee originally, but more broadly now, coffee, tea, but, iced coffee, all of our beverage line. Which is a great business to be in. It's a high growth business, versus a lower incidence purchase like donuts would be. But you need food to attach to those beverages. But we have this discontinuity, so we really wanted to understand what the consumer thought of us in different parts of the country, in different consumer segments. And we then wanted to understand where we could operate. So were we competing in the right markets, and how were consumers trying to use us?
And some of the results from that study were a series of initiatives, as you've mentioned, that are in operation right now. Give me some examples.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the menu simplification we talked about. So that was one of the big insights.
Okay.
Some of the others, we're actually looking at the entire brand expression. Our marketing team has been working on that in a couple of different iterations. So there's been some news with some test stores where we've tried different signage. Some of it a little controversial, at least here in the core market.
The ones where you drop donut.
Well, we drop
just
donut
do
from the
Dunkin'.
name, but if you reflect back, Starbucks dropped coffee from their name. KFC stopped spelling out Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yep.
A number of brands just become a brand,
Yes.
as opposed to having to explicitly explain it to you. And again, we're much more a beverage concept than specifically a donut concept, certainly today. So that's one of the changes. And then we're looking at a lot of operational changes as well. So dispensing systems, there are some technology components in store, but trying to improve the service model with a simpler, more straightforward menu so that we can reduce friction, inaccuracy, et cetera, in our service to our customers.
And so that kind of is a nice segue into the biggest IT initiatives that are part of the operationally rolling this out. You mentioned that you're revamping your POS and your back office system software right now. That's pretty major. That's like airlines revamping their reservation systems, right?
And of course, you have to do it while you're still running the business.
Of course you do.
It's the old change the engine while the car is running.
Yeah.
That actually started as an independent initiative, but we've dovetailed it into all of those that came out of the strategic study. We were just on an aging platform, and a lot of the requests from the business functions we just couldn't support with the platforms we were on. And for a number of different reasons, we're now in process with changing out both our point of sale and what we call back office system. So all of the rest of the store operations, maybe not necessarily customer facing. So labor, inventory, receiving, supply chain, all of that for the store. For both brands, so both Dunkin' and Baskin domestically.
Yeah. Well, and the IT, and your IT organization plays a very interesting role in the franchise model.
Sure.
So I wanted you to kind of explain a little bit more about that. I'm always surprised at how tight your team is. I mean, you think about a nationally known brand like Dunkin', and I'd be thinking couple thousand IT people. Yeah. That's not the case.
No. We're just very efficient. No.
There you go. Each of my people is worth 10.
That's right. That's right. It does make the comparisons easy, though.
Yeah.
When we have a debate over spend. But the reality is restaurant retail as an industry is highly franchised for a whole lot of reasons. But, the fundamental concept of using other people's money and lending them your brand and operating model works very well. Works well for our franchisees. They don't have to develop product. They don't have to develop a whole brand expression. We bring a lot of standards, including from technology. As part of that, we are an interesting business as a result in that we are a modest, $900 million company, but we're running a large $10 billion plus system.
Yeah.
And in my world, sometimes that means I'm a fairly, small to mid-sized business when I do things like provision devices to our employees because we don't have that many employees, maybe 12, 1,300 nationally. Then when we think about things like a store network where we actually design and stand up technologies that are consumer-facing in store, we're a very large account to, say, a a Verizon enterprise. So to Verizon retail for cell phones, I'm inconsequential. To Verizon
Right.
enterprise, we're
You're
a
a big
meaningful
dog.
account. So
Yeah.
it makes us a little dyslexic sometimes.
Well, and then you've also got the brand too. I mean, the famous
Sure.
brands. I've run into other CIOs who will have a very well-known brand and a relatively small operation, but
Sure.
they can pretty much still say jump, and the vendors will say which window. So that can be very helpful. Well, and when I'm thinking about the kind of upgrading and the things you're doing across, it's actually across both brands, across
Both
the
brands
business?
domestically.
Domestic,
But that,
okay.
let's call that half our business. Yeah.
Well, and I know every time you and I talk, we always get into the innovation in the digital space.
Sure.
And, the consumer-facing stuff, the apps, the features, and the functions.
Yep.
What is the latest that you're working on with that? And what are the next steps that you're kind of looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, first, just a historical comment, because, I think now we look back on the last decade or two, and it's been a fascinating time. So if Amazon came along and disrupted anything that could be delivered in a brown box, so initially those were books, obviously.
Yes.
And then it became virtual goods, because those didn't even have to be put in a box. And then, I lived through sort of the next generation, I call it, where there were certain use cases that lent themselves even for, freshly prepared products. So think of, food and beverage. And that was predominantly pizza, because you had to call
Right.
someone and tell them where to bring the product to. So that lent itself to moving to, a mobile or digitized delivery method. So now we're probably at the tail end of that. So Amazon hasn't figured out how to deliver a fresh cup of coffee in a box, fortunately.
Fortunately for you, yes.
Yeah, and our franchisees.
Yes.
However, the consumer who is now used to that for all of the other things in their life that can largely be brought to them in a brown box,
Yeah.
is still inclined to use digital products, services to engage with brands. So
course.
for us, that means, mobile ordering and payment. So you want to order ahead, have the product ready as you drive through or, walk into one of our stores. And pay for it virtually. So you
Yes.
don't, ideally, in the consumer's mind, they don't have to engage with anyone, and everything is there and ready for them at the moment that they want. So that's what we've been working on. We started with mobile payment in 2012.
Yep.
We added our DD Perks loyalty program on the Dunkin' side in 2014, and for the last 2 years, we've been doing mobile ordering. So a complete ecosystem now with a loyalty component to let you order ahead, pay, and then pick up in store in any way you want.
Well, and I remember talking with you about these concepts a couple of years ago, back in
Yep.
2014. And not only did you hang around and stay with it as the CIO, but you've actually delivered on all of this. It's I was going back and looking at just some old interview notes I had, and I was like, well,
Yeah, it's out
delivery,
Yeah.
check,
there.
done.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So delivery is probably an extension. I think that's where we're all experimenting right now. Looking, again, maybe the pizza model is a good example, but we're trying to not only have you come to us, but provide us bringing in a short time frame product to you.
Yeah.
So delivery, even for small things like a beverage, is starting to become a real concept.
Wow. Well, one of my CIOs that spoke at one of our events last year is the CIO of a big restaurant chain in the Southeast. It's Carabio's Italian and Stonefish Grills and all of those.
Okay.
It's Bloomin' Brands.
Yeah, I know Bloomin' Brands.
Yeah, and they had a big, an ongoing internal debate about whether just having people could order and come in and pick up, but then there was the move into delivery as
Absolutely.
well. And the big fear was that it would actually start eating into profits at the restaurants themselves.
Sure.
And the opposite has turned out to be true.
Yep.
It ended up being a very fast-growing business. So there must be a lot of interesting conversations that go on with the marketing folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've tried even further extensions if you think about catering. So large orders in a setting other than just think of a commuter coming through or someone on the go coming through our stores. We've tinkered with curbside, so you don't want to come in the store, but you'll come to the store. You want to pull in, but have it brought out to you. We've played with all of those. All of them have been tried.
Yeah.
We'll see which ones actually stick and the consumer really
I know,
wants
and
to utilize.
if we were to get really retro, consumers would want someone to bring it to their car on roller skates.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Maybe we're going back to that model.
We're almost there. If you
the
look at
American
Sonic,
Pie
Sonic
thing.
is still close.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and whenever I'm talking with CIOs about their biggest initiatives underway, I always have to throw out everybody's favorite topic, the cybersecurity aspects.
Sure.
All right. How has that? What can you tell me about
Sure.
your approach to cybersec, and what sort of issues are more of a concern for you now than they might have been 2 or 3 years ago?
Okay, yeah. So that's fair question on the update. Well, I'd go back again and say ever since let's mark the milestone at the Target breach at the end of 2013. We very quickly did some auditing internally to say where are we exposed. We spent the first few years since making sure we had our house in order. Now we've transitioned to being very innovative and evaluating what else can we layer on as new tools and services emerge. And there's a lot of innovation in that space, as everyone knows. In fact, as far as technology, private equity investment, I think, cybersecurity is probably number one even now. But I would also say starting then and still to this date, it's my top priority. As our CEO says, second only to food safety, data security is the number 2 issue that could impact our brand. Because if consumers are afraid to come in and use their payment cards to purchase your product, there's little else you can do other than make them sick. So with that kind of focus, it's been a weekly management topic at our leadership meetings. It has been a standing issue or topic at either our board or audit committee. One or the other I present at every meeting to provide them an update. So it's really been a focus area. And even those that maybe don't have a technology background have educated themselves a lot.
Yep.
So I find now, even among our board or broader management team, that those in perhaps unrelated, functions have educated themselves a lot on what could cause a breach, what do you do in the event of a breach, and how do you respond, prevent, et cetera, and where are the risks. So it's been very collaborative, but it's nonstop. It's still job number one.
Well, one of the, I run a series of regional CIO events, the CIO Perspective Series, and one of our standing elements now in the agenda, we started doing this last year, is a discussion with CIOs and CSOs about various aspects of cybersecurity. Last year, we talked a lot about educating the board and how you do that and how you engage senior executives in really understanding what's involved and why so much money has to go toward cybersecurity, that kind of thing. This year, we've been talking, our new topic this year is resiliency. It's about like building these shock absorbers into the organization because you have to assume that some sort of breach will happen somewhere.
Absolutely.
And it's about finding it earlier and mitigating.
And I always share the perspective that just keep in mind that the bad guys out there wake up and innovate every day. So it's not because we just defeated them today that they're going to give up and go away. So we have someone out there trying to destroy or compromise our work every day.
Yeah. Do you go it alone in terms of the expertise, or do you partner with outside cybersecurity experts?
Absolutely partnering, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, I would say that we have, again, we are a lean team, to your point earlier, just given the asset-light model of our business. But we have used partnerships to educate and develop our own folks, in our, infrastructure, broader, information security area. But we have a lot of partnerships, both for not only for, breach response, defenses, et cetera, but also for some of the, think about the communication. What kinds of retainer models do you need to have in place? Insurance models, and actually, a lot of the insurers now have even added elements of education because it's in their interest for you to be better skilled at defending and then remediating if you fail
So
at
the
it.
phishing things.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even publishing companies are doing that now. We were all so surprised.
Even publishing companies.
Even publishing companies or tech media companies now. We have to, a couple times a year, we have to go through security training on it and everything. And it's kind of embarrassing if you get like 70% on the test.
Yeah.
That's a C.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah.
We sequence it. We train annually. Actually, we're moving to biannual. Then we test, and then there is a little embarrassment factor when your boss gets notice that you didn't pass the test.
Yes, exactly. He only got 7 out of 10 questions
right.
right. And you're like,
Or you clicked the link you shouldn't have.
Yeah. Well, and when I thinking again about the role that IT plays and the size you do this with, you made the point you're less than $1 billion in revenue and running $10 billion worth of stores, and you're doing that with 100 IT employees roughly.
That's right.
But I think you said hundreds of partner resources.
Oh,
so there's
absolutely.
many, many more hundred.
Yeah.
How does that work in terms of the skill sets that you need in your IT department? It doesn't sound like your typical, plan, build, run kind of setup.
Right. Well, I think that still applies. It's just a function of, are they our employees or partnered resources?
Yeah.
So by and large, for instance, I don't have any entry-level jobs in the organization. So I don't hire, think of, bench application
You're not frantic
developers.
to find millennial developers.
No. I mean, we still have plenty of millennials, but they're typically, second, third position in their career because we're made up more of very senior, very skilled professionals in areas that can then manage partners with a lot of resources under contract to us and our franchisees to provide services.
Yeah. I feel like for many companies in different industries, that's almost certainly going to be the model going forward, where the core IT group actually ends up getting smaller, but the way they're managing it's like the kind of the nucleus.
Yeah, certainly in some areas because our partners can achieve scale by having multiple clients all who have the exact same need. We focus more on the things that are unique and differentiate us, and therefore apply it to Dunkin' or Baskin very specifically. But there's little motivation for us to stand up our own service desk call center for our franchisees when there are large partners who have been very successful and provide great service doing that for many, many different customers.
Well, and thinking about the franchisees, they have to invest essentially. They have to pay their way for the technology. How have their needs and requirements or their demands on you? How have those changed in the last few years as consumers have gotten more demanding, more insistent? Everything should be the Amazon model,
Yeah, if we go back to our mobile app architecture, or let's say broadly our digital consumer engagement, our franchisees, like many non-tech industries, were not used to technology being mission critical in their stores.
Right.
Now it is. Even today, there was an outage nationwide with one of our payments ecosystem providers, and that now is mission critical, and it caused a lot of disruption for us and across
carries
retail.
Cash, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So as consumers, have demanded technology services in consumer branded products and services, our franchisees and our company itself have had to educate themselves on technology and why does it break, why does it take so long to fix it. Those are problems they didn't have, call it a decade ago.
Right. Well, and a decade ago, though, they didn't have their own devices. They didn't have a supercomputer and their cell phone.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So all those
that they wanted to use with our store or our products.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then along came the iPad.
That's right.
Everything changed with that too. And that the next topic I wanted to get into a little bit more is the mission critical role of mobile technology.
Sure.
As you mentioned, you started out a few years ago. We're thinking through kind of this whole ecosystem and how it would develop. What are the biggest milestones that you've hit lately with mobile?
Yeah, well, if again, I go back to, we started with payment in 2012, and that was, and the same construct we use today, where you can display using our app a QR code that we scan in store to pay.
Yep.
So that eliminated the wallet, even before the
wallet ever caught on.
Yeah, before everyone tried to move a wallet onto phones. So that was the initial foray. Then we laid over that the Perks loyalty program. So now you give us insight into your order, so we know all of your orders are yours. You earn points, and then ultimately get a free beverage reward to redeem those points. So we layered that in 2014, and then again 2 years ago we added mobile ordering, so you could order and pay virtually before you showed up.
Yeah.
And today you can do that. If you walk in, your product will be waiting for you on the counter. You literally, and I do this once or twice a week, I can walk in, speak to no one, pick up my food and drink that has my name on it, and walk out with no interaction with the crew.
You don't get your coffee for free?
At the office, yeah. Not
Only
in
at
our
the
franchisee
office.
stores. No.
I remember years ago visiting downtown at your headquarters, and the walk through the break room was.
That's right.
I just walking 3 feet into it, I think I gained 5 pounds. I mean, it was just. I said every day, and the smell was so divine. No wonder you can hire whoever you want, right?
Yeah, you have to be careful though if you're around it all day.
I would think. Yeah. Now, what are the next big shifts that are coming? We talked a little bit about how beacon technology is something that's been very popular in other retail, like in malls and in clothing stores, but it doesn't necessarily work so well in a drive-through lane.
Yeah, one of the interesting problems we're still working on is. I need to know. I'd love to know the same effect, that we have if you walk in a drive-through. That it's Mary Fran. I know which order she ordered. We've already got it ready for her, and so when she pulls up to the window, we just hand it to you, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to do anything. That's the ultimate seamless experience. So we've tinkered with a couple of ways, because the real problem for quick serve drive-through concepts is I need to know you're the fourth car, not the third or the fifth car.
Yeah.
So I've got to have that kind of resolution. Beacons, and you're referencing Bluetooth low energy beacons, have made huge forays into retail, particularly in large format retail. So we know you're on this aisle, likely looking at this product. So that's very valuable to retailers, where in large formats, they want to know where you are in the store, what your dwell time is, what's your path around the store. And they learn a lot about how to tune their planograms and floor plans. In our concept, it's really about the drive-through. So getting down to the resolution of a car length is a little tricky reliably. The other thing is, and as even Apple shared with us, and I love the expression, so I've used it, but attribute it to them. That phone in the car to detect, and that's really what's going on, the beacon, and therefore work. Having that phone floating around in this Faraday chamber of a car, if it's on the floor versus the seat versus in your hand, you may have different success at actually having it detect the beacon. So that's a little different than just in your pocket walking around a regular retail. So it's a challenging problem. It's a lot of fun, and that's a lot of the fun we're having. We're starting to tinker with other technologies. There's a lot of license plate recognition, so optical or video-based technologies. There's magnetic resonance, because we have loops detecting when cars pull through the drive-through. We have lots of sensors out there that we're trying to leverage to get to that nirvana.
If you're our customer, we're trying to detect you.
Well, that's true of everybody these days,
it is.
right?
It's totally true. It is. Well, and I was thinking, if that car that's just dying for that double espresso pulls up and you hand them my nasty green tea, you can see how the driver would pitch a fit about that.
That is true.
Well, and I think think you mentioned to me that it's 60% of your stores now have drive-through lanes.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
absolutely,
okay.
and growing. Yes.
And growing. So ultimately it will be all of them. Nobody's going to get out of their cars anymore, are they?
Yeah. Well,
You
I
know?
mean, keeping in mind again, going back to the strategy work we did, consumers see us as an on-the-go brand. It might
Okay.
be commuting.
Yep.
It might be picking up the kids, dropping off the kids, going to school, going somewhere, but you're going from A to B.
It's not a
and we're-
destination where they're
that's right.
going to open their laptop and
That's
work
right.
on it
That's
there.
right. Yeah. So that's how consumers are using us. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if they're likely in a car anyway, we want to facilitate
Mm-hmm.
making that as seamless as possible.
Well, I can remember some years ago just noticing that about the Starbucks brand is that they always had areas where there were people hanging around. It was people come in, they're not necessarily on the go. It's kind of more of a destination. They're going to hang out and do their email there for, like an hour and a half.
Yep.
Whereas it's true you don't see that at Dunkin'. It's just a different feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not that we've tried to avoid it. We provide, public Wi-Fi the same as,
sure you
as
do, yeah.
Starbucks. It's just the consumer is using our brand differently than theirs, I think. So, and that's one of the things that distinguishes us.
And there you go. And it's good. Distinguishing is
Yeah,
good
yeah,
these
yeah,
days, right?
absolutely.
I can remember years ago, one of the other donut types out in the world is Krispy Kreme.
Yep.
And one of my kids was in college and had discovered it. They had like different racks of donuts, and they were different types.
Sure.
There were Dunkin' there, and there was Krispy Kreme, and there were a couple of other brands. And then we were in the South one time with both of these kids, and we drove by, and they both nearly fell out of the car. There was an entire store full of Krispy Kreme.
Oh, yeah.
And they had only thought it was a shelf in a particular store, like a
They didn't know
7-Eleven.
you could have a
And they
whole
were
store.
like, oh my God, a whole store
Yeah.
of Krispy Kremes.
Little did they know that's
Yeah.
actually how it started. Right?
I know, but they hadn't been to Atlanta yet
Yeah,
and
right,
seen that.
right.
So, I wanted you to mention your loyalty program a couple times, and
Yeah.
I noticed I read something about you added 2 million more consumers to it just in 2017 alone.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, and that's up to how many million now?
I don't know what number we've said last, and quite honestly, I don't have the most recent, but it's going to be on the order of 16, 17 million, something like
Yeah.
that. I'd have to.
Does
have to look.
right? I have loyalty cards to various things,
Yep.
and I never seem to have them with me when I'm in the right
know.
place. I'll go into a Hallmark store and they'll say, "Do you have one of our loyalty cards?" And I'll say, "I'm sure I do, but I don't have them." Ultimately, do you think people will still have the cards? I mean, when do we start doing
Yeah,
this?
our program
in
is
other
almost
ways?
exclusively virtualized already.
Okay.
So you download our app, and all of that loyalty functionality, as
Is
well
in your
as
phone.
the ordering and paying, is all handled right within the app on your phone.
Yep.
No,
Okay.
no physical component to it.
Okay, well, that works. Well, and my next question was actually about digital transformation, kind of with capital, the initial capital letters, what it means to restaurant retail.
Yeah.
And we probably have covered most of it with talking about mobile and the way consumers have changed. But are there, beyond mobile ordering and the payments initiatives, are there other kind of transformative business initiatives going on, anything internally or externally, that fall into that, I've been calling it the digital business ecosystem.
Yeah.
The way companies are changing, just the way there's less paper, the flow of information is changing so much inside of companies. I wondered if you had anything that I haven't asked you about along those lines that's going on at
Yeah,
Dunkin'.
I mean, in the enterprise, there's probably nothing that's not an opportunity anywhere else. And again, we're a fairly small company, so it's not an enormous either synergy, cost savings opportunity, et cetera. But sure, are we more? Are we less paper based? Absolutely. I've got a CEO who would like us to get rid of all the printers and not let anyone print anything. Hasn't happened yet, but that's his aspiration
In fact,
anyway.
I think overall printer sales keep climbing. Is the weird
Interestingly,
thing.
they keep getting bigger and more expensive, and
Three of them
supporting-
in my
yeah,
house,
yeah.
and I don't print that much stuff. I'm just like,
That's because you're a publisher.
oh, well, we say tech media now. we
Okay,
don't
right,
say
tech
publishing.
media.
Publishing
but you still
sounds
have a
like
printer.
print media.
Yeah, you still have printers.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I think if if I'm looking at the next frontier, while we're doing some sort of incremental extensions, once you can mobile order, You can mobile order for a catering use separate
Mm-hmm.
from a regular consumer's use.
Mm.
You can mobile order and have it delivered through curbside, as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. There are incremental variations on that, but the area that gets me most interested is I go back to this focus on the drive-through. So
Okay.
there are a couple of things, not just the detection of the car and figuring out how to make your experience really seamless
Mm-hmm.
through the drive-through. And we're looking at digital signage. So we currently already
Mm-hmm.
have 7,000 digital menu boards inside,
Yes.
trying to
Mhm.
bring that outside, which obviously has weather, theft, contrast challenges to it. But if we can have digital signage in the drive-through, we can do a whole lot of things there. We can
Mm-hmm.
do order confirmation. We can say, "Welcome back, Mary Fran," once we detect you in your
Mhm.
car. We can do a whole bunch of interesting things.
Yeah.
We can also do things earlier. So, for instance, we've partnered with both Waze
Mm-hmm.
and General Motors, and we're working with some of the other auto manufacturers to either integrate in car. So, before you get to the Dunkin', either link with our app or integrate in some fashion so that you can order through your car and not just your phone. If you're using Waze and you want to see the next Dunkin' on your route and
Yeah.
then link to our app so you can order from that Dunkin' as you go by. There are a lot of interesting car integration or car experience initiatives that I think is probably the next few years.
Well, and I think even now, I think you can just say, "Okay, Google," or
Yep.
ask Siri.
We've
and
done that
say,
with Google
yeah,
Assistant.
Yep. Show
We've
us
done an
the
Alexa
Dunkin'.
skill.
Yep.
Sure. You
And
bet.
around here in Boston, you'll get like, which one of the 14,000 locations
That's
do you
right.
want? Well, and it's just, I forget sometimes that it is the franchisee model because the different stores can be very different. Like the
Sure.
one we have in Stowe, Massachusetts doesn't look like the one that's in Boston or Brookline.
Yeah.
They're
I mean, we
fancier
have
there.
a-
They have their digital
Yeah,
leaderboards.
possible.
Yeah.
No, we have. I mean, we have a national menu that everybody provides, so that there's consistency for the brand. But there is some localization that our brand team allows
Yeah.
with franchisees to serve a very localized community.
Well, and you're experimenting out there now with the next gen stores,
We are,
next
yeah.
generation. How does IT play a role there, and what are those like? I know, has the one in Quincy opened up?
It is. It's
Quincy,
open.
Mass.
Yeah, it's actually a mile or so from the very first Dunkin', and they're actually owned by the same franchisee. So
Really?
you can see the latest expression of Dunkin' and drive down the street, also in Quincy, and see the original Dunkin'.
That's got to be a
from
feature story
1950.
for somebody.
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
It's,
I would
it's
think.
made the press.
I
Yeah,
would think
definitely.
so. Okay.
But yes, that
Yeah.
we actually have probably a dozen expressions now open of different next gen concepts, and we're tinkering with both the brand expression back to do you take Dunkin' off the name? Does it just go to DD? Does it become Dunkin'? So our brand team is working on evaluating some of those kinds of things, but. We're also looking at there are some technology enhancements in store. So a lot of what we talked about. We're also showing, for instance, an order status board. So if you've ordered ahead and you walk in, you have that anxiety of, did they really get my order? Have they already made it? I don't see it here.
Am I gonna end
are
up
they
with
working
green
on it?
tea?
Right. So we
Yeah.
want to show you your name in lights that, yep,
Yeah.
we've got the order and we're working on it, and it'll be up, shortly if you happen to get there that fast. There are some, initiatives in the drive-through. For instance, at that particular store, we were able to, and it's the first of its kind, create a dedicated mobile drive-through lane. So if you've ordered ahead, you can actually drive through,
Yeah.
bypass the speaker box, go straight to the window, and they will have your order for you.
Now, how are you identifying those particular cars? Is that all from the phone?
Yeah,
Because-
we aren't yet. That's something we're
okay.
still working on. But we know that the car is a mobile ordering car because they went by the speaker, right?
Okay.
They went in this
Yep.
other lane. So we know you're a mobile order. We just don't know it's you. So you still have to identify yourself at the window.
Okay.
I'm Mary Fran.
Yep.
And they have all
Oh,
the,
and
the
then they have
prepared
them there.
orders
And here
with
you
your
go.
name on it.
They'll be like, "Sorry, somebody got your green tea already." And that never happens, strangely enough.
Yeah. Actually, the biggest concern when we tried this was whether, good Boston Quincy crowd would be polite and allow cars to merge back to the one speaker lane, but turns out it's worked out just fine.
Has
They've
it?
been great.
Okay, yeah. Counting on anything from
No
Boston
fights,
drivers is
no
just
no accidents, nothing. No,
You're lucky
they
there's
were
no
good.
gas shortage
That's
going on
right.
right now. Well, and the one of the things you mentioned about the look in these stores, they're more like high-end, fancy schmancy grocery stores than like
okay.
a donut shop.
Yeah, I don't
you
know. I don't know that we're going for fancy schmancy,
Okay.
but it is definitely an updated look. A lot of the fit and finish in the store, as a number of our competitors are also doing. We've modernized the look and feel. There's also a lot of great operations initiatives. So we're looking at new methods of dispensing, new equipment in store for preparing food.
Yeah.
So there's a number of initiatives there, even moving the donut case from what you're probably used to seeing, even in Stowe, Mass,
behind the
a back
person.
case
Yep.
behind the crew. That in that Quincy store has been brought forward so the consumer can see it under glass, perhaps like a grocery store.
Yes. Yeah.
You're much closer to the actual product.
I was thinking like the bakery counter in Whole Foods.
Yeah,
where you can
it is
go
much
up.
closer to that.
Yeah, and they do, and they make more of a point of making it look fancy schmancy.
Yeah.
Well, they need to.
It's a very nice expression. It really is.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
The and when we were talking about the way consumers have changed, one of the things you pointed out is that, and all the research is showing this, that everybody is moving up market. That everything now is the demand for premium quality products, and that's where all that. And the next gen stores say that it's a huge success in Quincy, and you have another one in California.
Yeah, we opened one in California, but we've actually had several here. We've got one up in New Hampshire. We've got a couple in downtown Boston. So there's 6, 8, 10, 12 now, and we're opening one pretty routinely, all slightly different takes. We just did our first remodel, so it was an existing store instead of a new build.
Yeah.
And some of them are trying different components. So, for instance, we want to know in a store where the real estate is a constraint and we can't dedicate that lane, will a consumer still want to order ahead and have the product made if they have to sit behind someone in a single lane that has to order? It's sort of the easy pass. I want to be able to go buy them, not sit behind them while they're making change. So we're tinkering with different elements, but hope to get to a standard very quickly because our franchisees are demanding it quickly. They want this new updated concept very soon.
The 1,000 stores that you're going to add by 2020.
Yep.
Are they all likely? Will they all be next gen stores?
Absolutely.
Essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll probably settle on the elements of the design in the next few months, and it'll immediately start rolling.
It'll
out.
start going great guns. Is the plan to be in every state, or are you picking?
Well, we're almost
certain
there
slots?
now.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, obviously we're clearly much denser here, as you pointed out, than on the West Coast. But we're already in dozens of stores in California. And when I got here, less than 6 years ago, we didn't have a single store in California. So the expansion continues. Still lots of an enormous white space of opportunity in the Western U.S. for our brand.
Well, that's one of the
but
things
it's going well.
That's really different about restaurant retail compared to the clothing retail in the malls. I mean, increasingly communities are seeing empty spaces at the malls.
That is true.
So that whole trend of opening more stores, it's kind of like going in the other direction.
Yeah.
For some.
But to the point, we're not a destination.
Nope,
we're
you're an on-the-go.
Something on the go. So as long as we're in the right place to be on the go when you go by, I think consumers will still want to use us. Now, it is true, there is an increasing trend of consumption at home of all products. But I think at some point, even in the distant future,
you got to wedge people out of their houses.
You got to get out of the house.
At some point. Well, and all this makes me think about the enormous data story that is behind all of this. Are you at the point now where do you have data scientists on staff? Are you going to need them in the future?
Yeah.
Talk about your whole data management strategy and approach.
Yeah, we do have a couple. Between both my organization and our marketing team, our CMO and especially the digital team, analytics is increasingly critical.
Okay.
I would say versus what other industries are doing, we're still very early. I mean, if you think back, just 4 years ago, every customer of ours was anonymous. because you came in with your credit card or cash,
Mm-hmm.
bought and left. I had no idea about you, your demographics, anything.
Yep.
I didn't know when you were last in, when you're coming next, what you buy, at what
Unlike
frequency.
CPG companies,
They
which
know everything.
They have
They
huge
know
customer
everything.
databases.
Yeah. So,
That's a great point.
you know, now that we have a meaningful and still really well-growing mobile ordering and just our Perks program, even if you don't order ahead, anytime you use your Dunkin' card to purchase, we record the transaction and we know a lot about you, not to be creepy, but we want to know how you purchase and how maybe we can incent you to either buy more frequently, or if you come in 3 times, we suggest you come in a 4th. If you come in 4 times, we suggest you come in a 5th. So, but it's still very early days.
in
I
a
think
really friendly way, you'll just never leave me
that's
alone.
right. Well,
You know, and
know.
why don't I friend you on Facebook while I'm at it? Sure. Then you can have access to everything about me. Yeah.
well, let's be careful with that.
I know.
But-
Yeah, that's.
But no, I mean, as far as if we can make the consumer's experience better in a way they want,
Yeah.
we're all about that. And now we have some data to tie consumer behavior together and really know how they're using our brand and, frankly, you know, what they value. So,
Yes.
for instance, there's a huge value war on at the moment in our industry, but not all consumers are looking for the cheapest whatever. Some appreciate just the convenience. They want
Yeah.
it seamless. They want to order ahead. They want it convenient and take the friction out. So the delivery use case is a great example. People will pay $3 to have a $5 coffee and breakfast sandwich delivered to them. So there is a consumer that is price insensitive
Yeah.
for the convenience of it. So we're trying to figure that out and figure out what consumers really want so that we can deliver it.
Boy, that's the perennial question, isn't it? What do consumers really want? And it's changing year over year now as different things come along and they're like, oh, the Uber-like experience
Yep.
I want. Uber Eats is very interesting, where people are getting food delivered by Uber.
Yeah,
You're
worked with
looking at
them.
that too?
Yeah, and others like them, the DoorDashes of the world. You know, we've partnered with in a couple of markets. So yeah, delivery is going to be huge. Whoever ultimately succeeds at that, and I'm sure there will be multiple providers out there. But providing that service to a consumer is clearly in demand.
And do you have to, essentially, you have to keep looking around to see who the disruptive new players are going to be in the coffee space, right?
Yep.
How do you keep on top of that sort of thing?
I mean, some of it you can see coming. Some of it develops in Europe or other markets. Some of it is just new entrants. So obviously you can watch new concepts open in restaurant retail or QSR specifically. Some of them stick, some of them don't. But just seeing what is being tried out there tells you a lot about what others or consumers think are either innovative new product, innovative new service models, whole new different businesses and ways of delivering, packaged goods or branded, products and services to consumers.
Well, I had a conversation about this sort of thing with my CIO friend from Bloomin' Brands, and they were looking at a whole bunch of restaurants and airports were putting iPads at the table where kids could play games on them and you could order and everything.
Sure, I've seen that.
And so they tried it. They rolled it out to many of their restaurants and discovered that the people that were coming to the Bonefish Grill and the Italian places, they were not looking for an airport experience. They didn't like the whole idea. They were there essentially to be waited on, to have it. It was a different level of experience, and so the expectation was different. And some people also found the germaphobe aspects of it.
Oh, really?
The idea,
Interesting.
I know. And it was one of those things where they thought, okay, well, a lot of our competitors are doing this, so we'll experiment with it. And that kind of stuff is fascinating.
Yeah,
because
we
of the
have
things you learn.
a raging debate about kiosks in quick serve versus mobile ordering on your phone.
Okay.
I obviously prefer the phone because it's your device that you paid for that I don't have to support and maintain.
Right.
But we see a lot of our competition using kiosks, and maybe there's an argument for a consumer need where the consumer doesn't want the small piece of glass that's theirs. They'd rather use ours, but they still don't want to approach the counter and talk to a crew member. So we're going to, experiment with it and try those out. I think the jury is still out on, is it a big idea versus just another way to
Yeah.
order?
Is it just another wrinkle? Is it something that only 10% of your
Right.
customers are interested in? And then is it worth it?
Right.
Yeah.
For the expense of
Yeah.
putting another device in store.
Yes.
Right.
Well, this is why you get the big title, the Chief Strategy Officer, right? Now, a lot of the things that we've been talking about are in very innovative ideas. They're very much thinking forward and thinking about the business. What is your approach and your philosophy about innovating with IT? I've talked with some CIOs who take a fairly formalized approach, and they'll have tiger teams or innovation centers or specific people that are just their job is to look at all the crazy new stuff out
Yep,
there and what we
sure.
should use. And then others are more a little less structured, and there's more feeling of innovation is everybody's job.
Yeah.
So, talk about kind of your approach and philosophy to it, and has it changed over time?
Sure. Well, I'll start with, and I don't want this to sound academic, but because it's really more practical than anything else. Given as small as we are, innovation has to be everybody's job. So it's definitely the latter option. We don't have a standalone organization either, and think of our colleagues in marketing or my organization. And we've seen this. It's really everybody's job. And I like that for a couple of reasons. One, it's practical. I can't dedicate resources to create a separate organization just focused on that. Also, when you do that, everyone else feels like, well,
Left
gee,
out.
I
Yeah.
can't work on the cool, sexy new stuff.
Yep.
I have to work on the day-to-day.
That's what I hate about that bimodal IT idea.
Yeah.
Here, this is the slow group and this is the fast group. It's like, all right, raise your hand. Who wants to be in the slow group?
Well, sometimes you want to be slow. I think of accounting and finance. Slow is just fine.
Okay.
Let's not try and be innovative
I think
with
they want to
treasury.
be safe
That's
and
right.
careful. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. You're
right.
right. You don't get a lot of people wanting a lot of agile development on, for instance, your legacy mainframe
That's right.
stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Or even new accounting pronouncements when you need to make changes.
Right.
Let's be
right.
thoughtful about
yes,
that.
this is true. There are some regulations to pay
Yes,
attention to
absolutely.
there. Yeah.
But the other aspect I'd share back on the innovation is, we've had some great technology ideas come out of our marketing team.
okay.
We've had some interesting marketing ideas come out of our team.
Can you give me an example?
Let's see. The most recent is one of our digital team members was really fascinated by Google Voice Assistant. So think about almost now getting beyond just, can I ask a device a question and get a response, but have an interactive conversation. So one of the things that you start to think about is, well, gee, going back to that drive-through use case, at some point it might get interactive and good enough. Well, I'll break it into two generations. The first generation is, let's use it as a translator, because oftentimes for accents or different parts of the country or whatever it might be, the crew member can't understand someone ordering in the car through a speaker.
Okay.
Or the driver can't understand the crew member. So imagine if you insert a voice assistant between the two to translate for one another.
Interesting.
So that's the first
Yeah.
generation. The second generation is perhaps it'll get good enough it can take the order, and you're not even talking to a human without knowing
No,
it.
you just mention it in your living room, and your
right.
device picks it up and
Or at the
sends
speaker
the order
box
at
in the
speaker
drive-through.
box.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that but that idea, and tinkering with it with one of the big technology partners was really being led out of our digital marketing team.
That's so cool.
And now we're working with them to try and test it out.
Yeah. Do you have a research and development group at Duncan? Is it like a cross-functional group, or is it all in IT or in marketing?
No, not specific to technology. We do, but for us, our innovation team is really around product. So we have a lab for both food and beverage, but it's not really technology. It will get into equipment in store, but when we have to bring in an IT component to it, we do that out of our team and don't have a dedicated team for it. Again, I'd like to think everybody gets to participate and does by and large, just given our size.
Well, and just having a culture that encourages that seems like a really smart idea and very inclusive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you think about the last person I interviewed for one of our positions, using your example, I don't want to have to let them know they're on the slow team or the fast team or you're on the
Right.
team.
Yeah,
and
it's
that
just
can be
the
a lot of
team.
fun. There's
Yeah.
also the day-to-day of making sure things are up
Yeah.
and running as they should. But hopefully everybody can get excited about participating in,
Yeah, and
what's
kinda-
next.
Well, and that you've been interviewed on this many times about the cross-functional culture you have at Dunkin', and that's actually something that a lot of companies work at trying to generate. But it was that way when you got there, right?
Yeah,
This is
and
not- yeah.
again, it's a practical reality of being such a small company. I can run into our CMO or COO in the hallway and make a very strategic decision simply because there's no one else that has to get involved. So
Yeah.
by virtue of being a small organization, there's not that many of us to have to get aligned to make a very strategic decision.
Okay.
So that's a lot of fun. But yeah, almost everything we do, in fact, I can't think of maybe one or two meetings that are just IT. If we
Okay.
don't have our operators and our marketers and even finance, treasury, all of
Yeah.
our functions involved, it's not going to be successful.
So you've even from the time you got there, you didn't have to deal with that issue of it being the business and IT, like
Oh,
IT was
absolutely not.
off in
Yeah.
some other department.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's a
my
luxury.
even my weekly data security meeting, which is about as wonky as it gets, we still have
Yeah.
operations, loss prevention, finance. We have
everybody's there.
and they participate every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, last question. I can't believe how fast our hour has flown by. One of the things I always ask CIOs about, how much of a slog is it getting the talent you need? And in 80, 90% of the time, it's a huge problem for CIOs, finding and keeping and,
Sure.
like acquiring talent and all that. But you're not at a crisis level with that. Is
Not
it
at a crisis
yeah.
level. I mean, I won't kid you. We are in a very
It's not easy in
a
Boston.
difficult
I mean,
market.
you got
The
you got
Boston
GE
market
just got here.
Yeah,
and-
GE
yep.
moved in downtown, so I don't appreciate Jim Fowler elbowing in, but they
Cut off his DD Perks
that's
card.
right.
Yeah,
No,
you're in
they're-
trouble now, Jim.
Yeah, no, everybody in the community is great, but
Yeah.
there's also a lot of great talent here.
Mm-hmm.
Look at our higher education system. So there's a lot of great talent, but there is a lot of demand for that talent. I guess one thing that makes it not a crisis for us is we're a well-known consumer brand. I've always worked in branded consumer products businesses, so. I think you opened with this. Folks know who we are and what we do.
There's a
and
cachet to it.
there is, particularly in this part of the country.
Yeah.
So we've been able to find talent that wants to work for a fun, consumer products company.
Yeah. And all that free coffee. That can't hurt, I mean, you're not a beer company, but it's hard to be more fun than
That's
that.
right. That's right.
Because just last week,
Productivity drops if we started serving beer.
well, I suppose.
Coffee might be enhancing.
Coffee, yeah. Last week I interviewed Sanjay Sringapur from E&J Gallo.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
his talent problem is that he's trying to get recruit people to come out to Modesto
Yeah.
when they could live in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So being as close into Boston as you are is actually a pretty good.
Yeah, I totally know the challenge of Modesto because I used to work in the wine industry.
Yeah.
And even with the cachet of, we were based up in the wine valleys in Napa and Sonoma, the North Bay, and that was still tough to the point that we opened an office in San Francisco while I was there.
Yeah.
Just because of being able to attract talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah, it's
joining
been
us
great fun.
today.
Always
it really
great to see
has
you.
been. It is
Yeah.
great to talk with you indeed. And thank you very much for our live viewers who have joined us. If you came in late and you're just dying to watch the whole full episode, I know I would be, you can find it posted tomorrow on CIO.com. It is, of course, running now on @CIO Online on Twitter. And we make an audio podcast of this fascinating interview with Jack Clare, available on iTunes and SoundCloud and Google Play. So please feel free to download the audio podcast and listen in your car. And I hope you can also join us for our next episode. I'll be back on Tuesday, May 22nd at 10 a.m. Eastern. And I'm going to be interviewing the Adobe Systems CIO, Cynthia Stoddard, then. So thanks so much for joining us today for CIO Leadership Live with Jack Clare.
Okay.
Okay.